Bridgerton's my show right now for like, what do I want to watch that's like just for mommy? Bridgerton.
I have rewatched that carriage scene like 6 times.
I had to rewatch it twice because I stayed up super late watching it the first time and I dozed off. I was like, wait a minute, the internet's been blown up about this. I need to go back.
Like,
and so I rewound it and rewatched it.
When he like chased after the carriage, I was like, it's happening! It's happening! Because I just read this book. And then like, no, the part that gets me is when she like runs her hands through his hair. The way he looks at her, like
she's God on this green
Oh
earth.
my God.
Yeah, like
inject
goddess.
it directly into my veins.
Yes, you're like
incredible.
Look, I want someone to look at me the way
like
Colin
he
looks
is
at Penelope.
Down bad,
yes.
100%.
Yes. Like when you get that look from significant other and you're like, yes, let's do it.
Absolutely. Just absolutely.
Sorry.
That like, wow, like something deep inside the subcockles of my corncob heart gets like cracked open every time. My crusty old corncob Grinch heart that is like it is growing multiple sizes, but I don't like it. I'm at that like my eyes are leaking stage of like, what is this? What is this feeling so sudden and new? To quote Wicked. And then I watch that and I'm like, wow, all right. Here we are. Let's just rewind and watch it again.
Why not?
And then just to fully continue indulging this horny book club mom energy that's happening right now at the top of the pod. Did you see the interview about how he fixes her dress with just the 2 fingers?
Well, I didn't see the interview, but I know that's...
So he like fixes her dress with like not how you'd normally fix a dress for reasons. You all know if you watch it, and if you don't know, then you don't need to know. Back off. And so the director was like, I wish I could take credit for that, but that was all Luke. I didn't tell him to do that. And then Nicola was like, wait, did you do that on purpose? And he's like, well, and she's like, wow, kudos to you. You're making them all crazy.
Listen, get you a man who is that in the know to...
Right?
Yeah, get you a man.
And then somebody else was, this is so filthy at the top of the pod. Somebody else was like, Anthony would have licked his fingers. Anthony.
I have read far too many like Twitter threads about how like it's just about Anthony and Kate and how they're like freaks for real, and I was just like, stop it.
Yeah.
And I'm just keep scrolling, and I'm like, with all the GIFs, I'm like, you stop it right now.
Yes. It was the I do that as well. It is the exact opposite of how I felt researching this, where every 5 seconds I was like, gross. Oh my God. Ugh. Disgusting. With them, it's like, yes. Okay. All right. I see you. How many years till we get Benedict's story?
Probably 3.
Somebody posted a tweet that was like, maybe it was on Threads, or like, Season 18 of Bridgerton ends. Shonda Rhimes looks at 58-year-old actor who plays Benedict and says, I think we need another 3 seasons before we tell your story.
Yeah, I learned recently, moving away from this, I had a little bit of a mental like spiral because I was watching a video on Facebook, which I will take with a giant grain of salt. And they were showing people holding pens and pencils. And I think I hold my pen weird.
There's a pen right there. Show me.
Like,
do it. Do it so I can open these Sun Buttercups.
Like, so they were saying, so if you look on my ring finger, I have a callus, which I've always had the callus there because I hold my pen like this, and my pen rests, the tip of it usually rests there. So when I'm like with my cursive, that's right, I'm a old millennial, so I do write in cursive, and I get made fun of. Like, how do you read that? I was like, I don't know, I just read it, and I write faster in cursive than I do.
She's like pinching it essentially.
They call it the tripod.
It's between like your thumb, your index, and your middle finger, but it is resting on the tip of your ring finger.
Yes.
So it's more like a pincher with almost all fingers except for your pinky.
And I found out that that's called like the tripod, and they
like correct it in children. Yes.
And I'm like, now I don't know how.
Yeah, I rest mine on my middle finger with my index finger on top.
Interesting. I don't know if I could do that. I'm like, I've been writing like this since I was like, I don't know, forever. I've been writing this almost like...
This motion is also why, like if you had two, I could show you why it was so much easier for me to do chopsticks.
Oh.
Because you rested at like almost the same point.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I didn't have issues with chopsticks. Like that was never a like thing for me. But yeah, and I was talking to my husband about it, and he was doing the same thing. I was like, oh, we write the same way. And he's like, what does it matter, Beth? Like, are we in school? And I was like, no, but like, I don't know. I found out I wrote wrong. And he's like, but what does it matter? What does it matter?
It doesn't. I just wonder if I feel like probably not if ergonomically one is better for you than the other, but
I just always had a callus on this hand. And like, sometimes it does hurt if I'm like writing pages and pages and pages and pages.
I also wonder if like one of you influenced the other. Like if you didn't always write like that. And then you adapted it because you were around the other one so much?
I don't know, because I would say dear listeners, we have been together a very long time, and we were dating back in high school, and we wrote each other notes, little love notes back and forth. Yeah. And we did all the little fun folds and stuff like that. So... we never saw each other, right? Because we were just exchanging the notes. So I don't think so.
So you can't confirm though. Like maybe he had a whole different writing style prior to you guys like always being together, like living together.
Just comparing penmanship between then and now, he's got the same penmanship. It hasn't like, but he also said, I don't write very often, like not as much as you do. He's like, so that's probably why my callus is not as prominent as yours.
Interesting.
Like, he doesn't have a callus there. I do. But he's like, you probably write every day. And I was like, it's true. It's true. I do write every day at my job. I write and type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird.
It is weird. Isn't that interesting? I was like, thank you for making me spiral about
How did you feel
really
about
stupid.
Those weird, like, triangle pencil grips?
I didn't use them.
I couldn't use them. They were so uncomfortable to me.
I didn't use them. If I had a pencil grip, it was
that like thin tube,
the little foam tube that you would just put on your pencil.
Weird.
And then the only time I really, really had a tough time writing was I fell at our elementary school.
Oh no.
And I like took a huge chunk out of my right hand. And I was growing skin back there, and I had on, and our school wasn't air conditioned, so you have to do a lot of writing, and I was writing in pencil. Well, this was the early 2000s, and glitter pencils were like a thing that were very popular, so it was sweaty, because this was like late spring. It was sweaty. I had on an ace bandage to protect my hand, and it was really thick because it just hurt, and it was like right here in the center of my hand. And then holding a pen, I had to put the grip on it because the pressure of like pushing that, and then like my hand kind of folding around holding the pencil, but having that, and then like my ace bandage be full of like sweaty glitter and like sweat, I was like, it was just so filthy. It was just so filthy, like, by the end of the time. And then, I don't know if we had summer break or spring. We had some sort of, like, maybe it was Memorial Day weekend. We had, like, a long weekend. And I was, like, I had the ace bandage off to try to just air out the wound, but it was growing skin back. And I was like this, like, trying to scratch around the wound. And then I accidentally touched it, and I went, ah! And then my dad looked at it and said, well, good job, Beth. You just ruined 2 weeks worth of skin growth. And I went, no. He's like, put your ace bandage back on.
Just the way you like stroked your palm just then made like my innards shrivel.
Yeah, it was not a pleasant experience. And that's probably like when I think of handwriting and I think of like grips and pencils and stuff, like that's my core memory, is this horrific like trying to heal my writing hand.
I'm trying to grow new skin.
Gross. While also like doing end of the school year kind of stuff.
Gross.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Welcome to the Lake Erie Library.
I just there was something I wanted to say, and now I can't remember. It was about the episode that aired today. So for you guys, for y'all listening, it'll be a week prior. But I can't remember what it was now.
Something about Jeepers Creepers?
Maybe? Yeah, I was in that episode. I don't know. I think I was also going to point out that now y'all heard the first part of a conversation that you should have heard first, but you heard second. So in context, maybe it should make some more sense at this point. So if you're like, what the heck is going on? Then go back and listen to the week prior. So 2 weeks ago.
Talking about we have not gotten any further in our theories of Justin.
No.
Douchebaggery data.
Yeah. Oh! I think you unlocked it in my brain. So we work with a person, not the one that we were talking about, not the one that we were talking about last week, but we work with someone who works in a different building who is a secret Justin.
No.
They go by their middle name.
No.
Yeah. And
Finger spell it now. Oh, wait, you're going way too fast. No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. And they're a little bit of a secret douchebag.
No.
Yeah, that's not their first name. And they got pissed at our team building event every year because they put their first name on it, and they were like, I've told you that I do not go by that.
Let's just rock my world. Do it one more time if I make sure I'm just whisper it at this point. I'm really bad today. Oh, she's gonna type it. This is gonna rock my world, I think. I think it's one name, but that I don't think that's correct. We talk about them. Oh!
And they work in the elephant graveyard, Simba. We do not go there.
Yes. Okay.
I could have just said it and edited it out, but I don't trust myself to remember. Yeah, that's their first name. They're a secret Justin.
You know what? Makes perfect sense. It's not as much as I don't know why I couldn't, like, this was not the letter I was thinking it was.
Rhymes with. Yeah. That was for you. That wasn't for the listeners, my thing that I was thinking of. But I was going to say...
Wait, that's just more data that proves
I know.
correct.
I know. But the Justin we know was like, you can just start calling me by my middle name. And I was like, no, because you have a very unique middle name, and it will be very weird to call you that.
Yeah. And also, the Justin we know is proving our theory correct. So why, let's just keep the ball rolling.
But they're the exception to
right,
it.
Right. But that's their true first name.
Yeah.
So,
so we can't ignore that evidence.
Yeah. Sorry.
Maybe they're a fluke.
The outlier.
Right. Outlander. But I saw the TV Glow recently. Are you aware of this movie?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know about it? Like anything in it?
I heard it was an LGBTQ plus horror movie. That's it.
Yes. I don't even know if I would call it a horror movie. This director, both of the films of theirs that I have seen have very horror elements in them, and I think are marketed as horror films, but then when you watch them, it doesn't necessarily feel like a horror movie. But it has a lot of 90s nostalgia in it because it's set in 1996. Cool. And the whole premise is about this young boy who wants to watch this TV show called The Pink Opaque that has super strong Buffy vibes, but then they keep reiterating, like, yeah, you know, The Pink Opaque, it's on the young adult channel. It's the last show before they start airing black and white reruns on Saturday nights. I'm like, oh, it's Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah.
On SNCC, 10:30. And he's not allowed to stay up past his bedtime to watch it. And he makes friends with like an older girl at school who starts recording episodes and sharing them with him so that they can like discuss it. And the director is a trans woman, and so a lot of sort of like their reflection of their journey. I don't know if they go with they them or if she uses she her, so I'm just gonna stick with they just to be safe. But they like sort of reflect on their experience and their journey through like transitioning a lot, and it's sort of reflected in these movies. But the thing that like killed me is such a universal feeling of when the main character is older, he goes back to watch The Pink Opaque again, and it like sucks. Like he was like, man, like I was so scary when I was growing up, and then he watches it and it's like it just doesn't hold up. And I was like, yes, very much so. Like I'm sure if I went back and watched that like pool episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, I'd be like, man, this ain't shit. Why was I so scared of this?
It's just our different like worldviews, right? Like that's you always like when you consume media at like the same media at different ages, you always get something out of it than you did when you were younger or something like that. It's like watching like E.T. or like all of these kind of traumatic childhood movies where we're like, like in Disney, like, oh man, Simba's dad died. That's so sad. And then now as like an adult, you're like, oh my god, this is so upsetting.
Watching Lilo and Stitch when I was in high school, and the most upsetting thing to me was when, like Stitch was gonna get caught and have to go back to space and was gonna have to leave Lilo. And now as an adult, it's Child Protective Services coming and telling Nani that they're taking her away because she's a bad parent. And I'm like, oh my God. Or realizing that like the reason that Lilo feeds a fish a peanut butter sandwich every day is because she thinks he controls the weather and her parents died in a car crash. Like that wrecks me now. But yeah, I really enjoyed that movie, and I think it's one of those ones that like I keep thinking about it and I like have had to kind of digest it over like the past 3 or 4 days, and I keep sort of like parceling out new things from it, but like I recommend it. Also, it's just really pretty to look at because everything is lit by like neon lights in dark rooms or like a glowing TV or a fish tank, and it's just really pretty to look at. So I think that's all my horror or horror adjacent news that I have.
Oh, there is that supposedly new I Know What You Did Last Summer movie is going to be made.
Yes.
We'll see what happens with that.
Yes. I think I had an article pulled up on my phone too. I think it was like a new... Oh, no, that wasn't horror. Never mind. That was Knives Out. There's going to be a new Knives Out.
And, I sent you this today, but I didn't know if you saw it. There was an article I found on Facebook that was like, the creepiest mythological creatures from all 50 states. And I'm like, all right, what's Ohio? Because I'm very curious.
My God, hit me with it.
And I was like, is it going to be Bessie? The, Lake Erie Monster? Is it going to be the Grassman? Is it going to be the Melonheads?
Tell me it's my boyfriend.
Oh, for sure, it's your boyfriend.
My caked up frogman boyfriend.
And I went, because you have to remember, I'm looking at all the other states before that, because O's kind of in the middle, and it's like La Llorona from New Mexico, and, the W from a couple of other states, and then, like, I think Michigan has some sort of wolf dog.
The dog man? Yeah.
And, of course, New Jersey's got the Jersey Devil. And, like, all these illustrations are so, like, creepy. And then I'm like...
And then you get to my sexy man throwing it back, looking coyly over his shoulder.
And I'm like, come on. I was like, he's not even creepy. He's kind of cute. I'm like, you can't be that kicked up and creepy at the same time.
Hold me in your webby embrace.
Like, that's not how this works. And I died a little bit. I died.
That's pretty good.
I couldn't even get, like, past Ohio. I was like, I clicked out of it as soon as I went to Ohio.
I showed you that clip, too, from the show on Dropout, where it's, like, they essentially make PowerPoint presentations. Yes. And, like, it's so funny. And the one was like, who's the most chill cryptid to blaze with? And I was like, it's gotta be Bigfoot, right? Like, he would just be down with, like, here's a bunch of berries I gathered for us to eat. Let's chill and watch the Aurora Borealis.
Yep. Did you see this giant redwood that, like, is hollowed out when you're just sitting there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll, like, climb up to the top.
Be fine.
There's a raccoon. He's really chill.
It's super fine.
You got the frogman. He's gonna cast a witchy spell on you with his magic wand. You got like Bessie. Your joint's gonna go out. You can't get in the water with that. Also, you probably drown. I don't think I want to be like super chill high in water. Like, what if I fall asleep? You know?
Yeah.
And then I feel like, didn't we say like the Defiance werewolf would probably get you like, I can never remember which one is which, but like there's like indica and sativa, and one is like for a chill high, and the other like kind of amps you up and like makes you more anxious. And I was like, he'd probably bring you the like fucked up one that's like laced with some shit, and you guys would be out like losing your minds at the train yards playing soft pitch in the middle of the night. And the melon heads would probably be like, we're straight edge. We don't blaze.
Oh, the melon heads. Yeah, I thought for sure the melon heads were going to be like and then when it was Frogman, I lost my GD mind. I was like, oh my God.
We did have a library in Northeast Ohio recently did a program on Gore Orphanage, the history of it.
I did not know that.
And they posted something on their Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, as us on our Facebook page, was like, hey, if you like this, listen to our episode from October. And I think we got some new downloads on that. So if you were one of those people who found it on Facebook and you actually listened to it past our 20-minute bullshit intros that we do, thank you and welcome. I saw that bug. I don't know what's going on. It flew.
I don't like that.
Do you want me to go investigate?
I guess so. It's probably a moth. Oh. I don't like this. Oh no. He's gonna crawl out of this box that you're gonna keep him in, and I don't like that. As you shake the box like Elmira.
He's in there.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
It was like that kid who brought the ant to us and then shook it out, and then he's like, oh, I think it's dead. And he put it back in his bug catcher and he took it away. Just don't freak out when it tries to fly later. And you God, I hit it and it's so loud. Have you seen the vibration thing? Like, it's going to be like inside of there later.
I'm not touching it.
I'll take it outside when I leave. Just remind me, otherwise you're going to have a dead stink bug in there.
So, while this has been so nice and joyful and silly,
I know, I think we're delaying the inevitable.
Yeah, I think we got to get into it.
All right.
So, today we are doing a true crime bit on the Lake Erie Library, and while I think the other thing we did is actually technically the most recent one, and for what true crime that's going on,
are you
since it's
talking
an
about
case,
Pike County?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This one is fairly recent as well. We're on the 10-year or 11-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Of people being found, of this case being kind of cracked open, the kidnappings of Michelle Knight, Gina DeJesus, and Amanda Berry, and being kidnapped by Ariel Castro. So, it's really heavy. I just want to apologize in advance. I didn't wear eye makeup today because I was like, I'm probably gonna cry, and I don't feel like cleaning mascara.
That's smart. I did not think ahead like that. But you're going to a concert and I'm not, so I'll just go home and wash my face and count my blessings, I guess.
I didn't feel like doing makeup twice, so I was like, I'll throw a little bit of something on, but nothing like crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, like Beth said, this is fairly recent. Like essentially this awful tale unfolds like in the early 2000s. I hear your doggo losing his mind up there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what about, but that's all right. Here
Interesting. We are. Like I was in high school. This always weirds me out because I am around the same age as two of these women. Like I kind of fall in between them.
Am also the age of one of these women. Like, so this is the type of stuff that, like, these are the, unfortunately, this makes me like so weirded out to think about. Like, we were just talking about at work the other day, like true crime cases that kind of defined our childhoods, because as women, like, you are told essentially these bedtime stories of like, you can't do this, you can't go out walking by yourself, you can't do that, you can't check your car before, like, don't take rides from strangers, don't, keep your cell phone at you at all times, type of thing. Like,
this is a prime example though of how you can be so careful, and all it takes is trusting the wrong person.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't think that I don't want to use the word spoiling. This is not like entertainment, but I don't think we're saying anything that people don't already know about this case if they're familiar with it. That was your notebook.
It was my notebook. It's fine.
That all three of these women were familiar with their abductor, and that is sort of statistically common.
Yes.
That most crimes like this happen because of people you know, and many sexual assaults and rapes happen with someone you're familiar with. It's not always just, an unknown stranger lurking in the night. And so, we are aware of that as women because we've had that ingrained in our brain. But reading the book I was reading, which is the one that Amanda and Gina wrote together.
I started reading that one. I'm about a third of the way through.
They both sort of like beat themselves up about like I thought this man was safe because I knew his kids.
Right.
Or like he knew my parents.
Right.
And so it just goes to show, like, from the outside, all these people who knew him never even had like an idea that something was wrong.
No.
And then you talk to, his victims, I'm speaking of like his ex-wife or his ex-girlfriend, his common law wife. And then these survivors who are like, I just made one bad choice in the moment.
And he definitely preyed on them too. Like,
absolutely.
He knew. He picked up, like, I had no idea, like, looking at these women, they're younger. This is an area of Cleveland. This is, in the west side of Cleveland. This is an area of Cleveland that's pretty impoverished. They either came from like kind of low income households or abusive households. And I'm not saying each one of the victims had an abusive household, but like,
yes,
they dealt with those like elements, and they're just trying to survive and get by. And he knew that, like, he said, like, he picked victims of opportune times. So it's like he knew he would kind of case as these types of people do. He kind of cased it, and he was like, who can I overpower? Like, that was something.
Yes, they're all tiny too.
That was something that was shocking to me. Like, Michelle Knight talks about her being 4'2", and I'm like, what? I had to Google it. I was like, no, she cannot be that short. And I was like, holy shit, she's 4 foot.
I knew she was short because I've been at an event that she was at before. And so I saw how tiny she was in person. And I was like, wow, she really is tiny. But I never really connected that both Gina and Amanda were also very short. Gina's the tallest of them, and she's only 5'2".
Yeah.
Like, so they're all tiny. I also just get so irate and angry at so many steps along the way, where if it had just gone, like, if someone had just waited 2 seconds longer, or if someone had just, like, actually believed someone and taken them seriously, like, these women would have been found so much sooner. And I just feel like a tremendous disservice had been done to both of them and their families.
Oh, 100%.
So I just 100%. Get so angry about it. But I guess should we just start at the beginning and we'll just kind of take this chronologically?
Yes, I would. I think that's fair.
Okay.
It's a fair way to do it. Michelle was the first of the women that were kidnapped. She was the first victim. Giving a little bit of background about her, she was 21 at the time of her kidnapping. She did grow up in that Cleveland area. She actually grew up in an extremely low income household. At one point, her and her 2 younger brothers were like they lived out of, or her family lived out of a car for like a year, and they ate apples from an apple orchard. So, and she, once they did move into a house, her mom and dad did both kind of work, but they always kind of in and out of jobs, and they had lots of family members come live with them. One family member that lived with them in particularly was an uncle that from the age of 5 until 15, when she ran away from home, sexually abused her every day and assaulted her every day. She did run away at the age of 15, and she was out on the streets for a little while. She relied on some of the kindness of strangers and stuff like that. And she eventually did get pregnant. She was a drug runner for a very short time, but it also sounds like that might have been like the most peaceful time in her life, when she was living with a drug dealer and another drug runner, because that was like the most stable her life had been, where she had like actual meals coming in per day, and she lived in like a warm house, and she didn't worry about being sexually assaulted. So eventually she did become pregnant, and she had her baby. His name is Joey, and she didn't want to live at home with Joey, but unfortunately she really had nowhere to go. And when she did live there, because of the tumultuousness of that household, Joey inadvertently was being abused by, I think it was her dad. No, I think it was her uncle. And Child Protective Services got involved. And when they got involved, she had to meet for like these hearings and whatnot, and Joey was placed in a foster family. So the day that she went missing, Michelle at that point was on her way to a court hearing, and she was literally trying to walk there, but this is 2002. This is before GPS.
Right.
This is really before kind of the prominence of cell phones. This is before looking on the internet for directions.
Yes, this is back when you looked it up and you hand wrote it, or if you looked at MapQuest, you had to print out all of the directions and carry them.
Right. And so Michelle didn't have a car, and CPS was going to give her a ride, and she's like, no, like, my family's going to take me. Well, then, like, an hour or two before she has to be somewhere, they're like, no, we can't take you anymore. So she decides to walk. So she's walking, and it's hours to get there. She ends up getting lost and turned around, which I'm like, man, we've all been there before. And this absolutely. Is even with a cell phone with like directions, and I've definitely been there before.
Cleveland is not a walkable city. Like, you have to cross a bridge to get anywhere. I mean, the streets don't make any kind of logical sense. Like, some are going diagonally for like no reason because of train tracks. So it's so easy to get turned around and lost. Like, there but for the grace of God could have been any of us.
And so as she is walking, she's like so turned around. She goes to a payphone. She calls CPS. They're being very unforgiving towards her.
Big fucking surprise, CPS.
very unforgiving. They're like, you should have been here by now. We offered you a ride. So she's so discouraged that she turns back to go home. And she's like, I'm just going to have to be late. And she's like kind of looking for more direction. So she stops at a Family Dollar, which is like less than 5 minutes away from Seymour Avenue on the west side of Cleveland. And she stops there to like get a drink, talk to the cashier, see if like they know where this is. And then she meets this man who is pretty unassuming, and she knows Ariel Castro because she knows that that is a friend of hers dad. And she hadn't really she's seen his daughter Emily. So she hadn't really seen him in person, but she had talked adjacently to, like, she had seen him maybe a couple times in person, but she had talked on the phone with him because his daughter Emily had a cell phone, and she would like talk to her dad, and he would like goof around with her on the cell phone. So she's like, I know this guy. That's her dad. Yeah. Emily's a good kid. Like, I should be able to trust him. Yeah. And he offers her a ride. And she's like, yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
at that point,
late.
It's like, what luck? Like, thank you. This, like, what a great opportunity in this shitstorm of a day. Like, something's finally going my way.
Right. So then he's like, I just got to stop at my house first to, at this point, I've read all three of them. So
he told her he had a dog who recently had puppies.
Right. And he said, wouldn't it be nice if you got a puppy for like, Joey?
Yeah. So he was like, let's stop at the house. I have to check on the dogs anyway. You could come and meet the puppies. And then, you know, maybe you could take one for your kid.
So she goes, okay. Because at first her heckles got up a little bit because he started going opposite of which way she needed to go. That's when he fed her the puppy line. And she's like, you know, okay. Because she's still in the back of her mind. He's a good dude. Yeah. He's not gonna, like, nothing's gonna happen to me. He's just gonna, I'm already running late as is. Might as well pick up this puppy. Well, then she thought she would just kind of sit in the car and like the puppy would be brought out to her. And he's like, no, come inside. And then he gets her further inside the house. And as he gets her further inside the house, she realizes, like, this is a bad situation. Yeah. But then she can't get out of it. Ariel Castro, even though he's not a particularly big man, he's 5'8". But he's a lot larger than her. Like, he's 5'8", she's 4'2". He's over a foot taller than her, and probably outweighs her by a good 150 pounds.
In the book that I was reading, they said that he would constantly mention how much he weighed, and then he was like, I'm 180 pounds.
So, you know, if she's like, well, so maybe 100 pounds. So she's like 100 pounds.
Yeah, she's tiny.
Yeah, she's tiny. He gets her. He immediately, like, assaults her. He chains her up. And then after he assaults her, he takes her down to the basement. Yeah. And then he essentially chains her up and tortures her. Like, he puts a helmet on her head so she can't see or hear anything. Yeah. He turns music up so she can't. And it's at this point that she's like, I'm not going to see my son. I don't even know if I'm going to make it out, like, alive. And the house is gross. Like, that's the big takeaway for me is I'm like, this house sounds just disgusting.
Yeah. He did not take good care of the inside of the house. He did not, like, clean regularly. There was always, like, trash laying around. And he also just collected a lot of junk. Like, there were tons of, like, cars and motorcycles and, like, parts of things outside as well and in the garage. And so it's like, I mean, I think everybody has, like, maybe some of you have never lived in a neighborhood like that, but I feel like a lot of people have either lived in a neighborhood like that or driven through a neighborhood like that where you're like, yes, the house with all the shit in the yard. Like,
he also, before she went inside, she made eye contact with a neighbor she knew that was living next door. Yeah. And he, like, waved to her and said hi. So there was, in her mind, prior to her walking into that house and fully getting inside, there was nothing that really, like, raised her heckles so much where she's like, I gotta go. Yeah. I gotta leave. Yeah. And, you know, he essentially threatens her, like, if you scream, you do this, I will, like, kill you. I will, like, beat you up. I will do this. I will do that. he essentially isolates her. He turns on loud music so she can't scream. He puts this giant motorcycle helmet on her head so she can't see anything. She can't hear anything. It's heavy. And he's also literally chaining these women up.
Yes, actual metal chains with padlocks, which are heavy regardless. But then when you factor in how tiny they all are and you add the weight of that metal chain, like, of course they couldn't get out of it.
Right. And this is how he treated her, like, between sexually assaulting her every day, multiple times a day, to, like, not even giving her a place to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Or giving her a place to go to the bathroom, but she can barely reach it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, like, not bathing, not even changing clothes, being naked for chunks of time. And this is how Michelle Knight spent, like, her first year in captivity, as she eventually was moved upstairs, but then Ariel Castro was known for, like, testing people, and he would be like, I'm leaving now, and then she said, like, I don't think he realized that we would, like, hear if his car or something would turn on and off. And he kept a job this entire time. He was, like, well, not this entire time, but he kept a job. He was working as a school bus driver.
Yeah.
So this was not kind of, it wasn't, he was just, you know, he had a job. He had, like, he did have kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So nobody thought anything of it. And because she was 21, the only people that were expecting her to be anywhere was CPS. At that time,
and they'd already kind of written her off when she called and was like, hey, like, my ride fell through.
So they were just like, she's just a trash mom that
God,
doesn't
that
care.
breaks my heart every time it comes up. I just feel so incredibly sad for her because this, like, so many things were just out of her control, and she was just, like, truly, like, a victim of circumstance.
Right. And to be a victim of circumstance and, like, and to be eternally kind of punished for it for years, you know, to kind of Ariel's horror, which I hate saying that, but he finds out shortly within her captivity that so we're saying she's tiny. It is said multiple times, she looks like she's 10 or 12. She does not look like she's very old. And then he finds out she's 21. And he's like, I thought you were, like, my daughter's age.
So disgusting.
Yes, I was like, oh, that's great, buddy.
This is,
like,
all disgusting. Like, everything he does is just monstrous and gross and, like, horrible. But, like, just to be like, I thought you were the lowest low you could be, and then it's like, oh no, now I'm, like, grossed out that you're not a baby.
Yeah. He eventually did give her a television. He was extremely racist, though, so he had rules about, like, television and radio. Like, you can't listen to things that are, like, that have African American people on them, because I don't like that.
Yeah, I think it was maybe Amanda said that he opened up her radio and put a piece of a plastic spoon from Wendy's on it so she couldn't turn the dial to change it to, like, 107.9, the rap station.
Michelle kind of endured this torture if she was let out of her chains, because he was very temperamental, and truly in the sense of the, like, the most purest sense of the word, where some days he would be, like, kind of nice to her. I say kind of, like, with the loosest of definitions of, like, I'm not gonna beat you today, but you're still captive. I'm gonna hold a gun at you, and you're gonna, like, be out of your chains, but you're gonna help me board up the windows. So my biggest issue with some, I was like, I get there's always one of those neighbors in the neighborhood where you're like, they're always a little, but I'm like, nobody, like, looked and said, that's weird that the windows are boarded up. It's weird that I can't see inside.
So I will say that culturally, Seymour Avenue this section of it is in Tremont, which is a neighborhood in Cleveland, which now is more of, like, I would call it, like, kind of hipstery.
Yeah, it's
been
gentrified.
A lot of, like, bars have opened up over there, and there's a lot more, like, foot traffic in a safer way. But it was also, and I think still, I don't think that many people have moved out, but it was a primarily like Puerto Rican, Hispanic neighborhood.
Right.
And culturally, you don't get the cops involved. You solve your problems yourself. Like if it's not your business, you stay out of it.
Right.
So I also understand that mentality of like, yeah, that dude's fucking weird. Like, I don't let my kids go near his house, but like, it's not my business. If he wants to board up the windows, let him board up his windows. You know what I mean? And so it's like
I know. It's just, that's so frustrating.
And if you have a problem with him, you solve that beef yourself. You don't call the cops or get somebody else involved in it. So I do understand it. And that's a lot of like reading the memoirs that they've written, like a lot of the things, like they just keep reiterating also, like there were so many chances when they could have tried to like make a break for it, but
Right.
they were so terrified of what he would do to them because he had just like messed with their minds so much,
right.
And traumatized them for so long that they just like could not trust that like he would not kill them if something went awry. So
Right.
like I get it.
Michelle talks about that. She says at some point, like, yes, the physical chains were taken off my body, but the mental chains were still there.
Yes.
And I think if you're always told essentially, like, if you don't do this, like, I'll kill you, and then you're constantly like being tested every day, multiple
Everything's
times
a trap.
day.
Yeah.
And when you say everything's a trap, like literally there were alarms and whatnot set all around the house. And as he kidnapped more victims, like there were even more.
Yeah.
But Michelle said she always tried to find ways to get out. And then she would like think it through. And then she's like, I literally couldn't do it because I was afraid of being like killed. And
right.
what kept her alive was the thought of like being alive for her son.
Yeah. I can also very much see that, like, in Michelle's life to this point, there has not been, like, I mean, yes, you did mention she relied kind of on the kindness of strangers, but more so, she had a lot of people who were just like, no, I'm not going to help you.
Yeah.
So, like you
all
already
of her
have
family who, like, were kind of assholes.
Yeah, you also already have that mentality of, like, okay, so I get out, but, like, no one's going to help me. Like, what, I run to the neighbors, they're not going to answer their door.
Right. And Ariel makes a point of every day berating her and telling her, like, you're nothing.
Yeah.
And, like, there's literally no one looking for you. And
scum bag. And
but the awful thing is he was not wrong.
I know.
Like, you know,
I know.
She eventually, because Michelle's given a TV, she eventually finds out that like another woman is missing, and she's like, oh wait, I know her. This is about a year into her captivity. And so she goes like, I know her. I went to school with like her sister. And like all these women are from kind of the same neighborhood. So it's very interesting because like it makes me think of like Me and You, where it's like our lives intersect at weird different ways because we're from like a very similar neighborhood situation where like while we were years apart in age, we remember a lot of the same locations, people, places, things.
Yep.
So Michelle's like, he caught another person. I know he did.
Yeah. And
he also makes it a point to say he only likes like blonde women, and Michelle's not blonde. She's not naturally blonde.
No.
But Amanda Berry is. And so she watches this TV and she sees that like Amanda Berry's on the news, like missing. And she just knows that that person, like that Amanda has been kidnapped as well. And, you know, she kind of figures that out first, but Ariel Castro also made a point to like keep the women as kind of separate as possible.
Right.
Because he was trying to manipulate them because he was afraid that if they came together, they would figure out a way to escape.
Yes. At that point, this is now 2003. I always have to like fact check dates on this. So April of 2003, April 21st, Amanda Berry.
The day before her birthday.
I know. It was the day after Easter. So, like we said, Amanda, she's also very tiny. She's like 5'1". She was like 120 pounds. So she's just like a tiny little thing. She, growing up, had been enrolled in like a gifted and talented program in school, and got like pretty much all A's or B's. But the school that she went to in the neighborhood she lived in, it was not uncommon for kids to like drop out by the time you made it to 11th grade. And the school she went to is like a it was a pretty rough school. There were fights every day. There was like a lot going on. And while Amanda was like a good student, she couldn't take like the drama of school anymore. So she enrolled in a program with Cleveland Public School where she could essentially homeschool herself. And then she just sent work in to get graded by teachers, and she paid for it with her checks from working at Burger King. And she lived like 10 minutes away from the Burger King she worked at. Her brother-in-law was a manager there. Yeah. So like, this is like all pretty standard, like, you know, teenage stuff. She's like 16. She's going to Burger King to work. She's like pissed at her brother-in-law because he was fighting with her sister.
She literally had plans to like go out for her, have people come over. She saved up $100. She was gonna buy a new outfit and get a manicure.
Yes. Yeah. So
like, she's had very much plans for her birthday.
Yep. She got like 100% on her first psychology test that she like got back like a week before this. She didn't really want to go to work that day, but it was like, just go, just get it over with. And then like, you get to look forward to stuff for your birthday. She was dating a guy named DJ, and like, she really liked him. And so she's like, all right, like just whatever, get through work, get on with your life. And like most teenagers, she's like, I don't want people to see me walking in my Burger King uniform. I'm not going to wear the gross pants with it. Like, so I'm going to wear my black jeans, and I'm not going to put my hat on until I get there. And then I'm going to take a shower as soon as I get home because I hate smelling like Burger King, and it like never gets out of my uniform anyway. She called DJ near the end of her shift to see if he would come pick her up. And like, this is like we were talking off pod earlier about like what dating is like when you're that age. And so they'd only been dating for like a month at this point. And while she really liked him, like, it's still like a new teenage relationship.
Very much so.
She didn't like walking home in her uniform because she didn't want people to see her. But also, like, her mom did worry about her walking home by herself. Her mom and older sister Beth worked together and worked like long hours. So she would often get home before her mom and Beth got home. She, you know, like, she was really good about keeping in touch with them on the phone and things like that. So like, her mom worried about her walking home, but she would just do it if she had to. And she was on the phone with her sister while she was walking home, and she happened to notice this maroon van parked like across the sidewalk in a driveway. There was a man in the driver's seat who smiled at her, and there was like a girl that looked sort of familiar sitting in the passenger seat. And so she remembers like clocking that, but she was on the phone with her sister.
Right.
And so she was just like, no, like, I'm already halfway home. Like, don't worry. I'm not going to wait for you to come pick me up. Like, I'll just see you guys when you get home. He pulled around further down her way.
Right.
And said, like, hey, do you want to ride? And so she, like, had that gut feeling about it. But then she recognized him. She was like, oh, like, you're Anthony's dad. Like, I know Angie, your daughter. Like, I guess that's probably okay. So she gets off the phone with her sister.
Kills, like, reading about this, it kills me because I'm like, you were 5 minutes away from home.
You could have just kept walking.
Walked.
And I'm not saying that as a judgment. Like, she keeps reiterating that she's like, why did I do it? Like, it wasn't that cold. I could have just kept walking. I shouldn't have gotten that van.
Yeah.
But again, you know 2 of his kids, so you feel safe.
And you're like, what's a 2-minute ride compared to a 5-minute walk? And
then when she was like, oh, I know your daughter Angie, he's like, oh, Angie's at my house. Do you want to come see her? And she was like, yeah, I haven't seen Angie in forever. And like, I don't have plans tonight. Like, yeah, I'll go. Like, my cousins live near where you live. Like, yeah, let's go. So he took her to the house. And then he kept commenting on her phone. And she had just got this cell phone, like, not that long ago. She bought it, like, used from someone that she knew. And he was like, can I see it? And took it from her. And then was like, oh, let me go get the dog. Because he had a big dog that was chained up in the yard.
Right. He has a big chow.
And the dog is, like, barking at the side door of the car. So, like, this totally makes sense in your mind in that moment to be like, oh, yeah, like, please get your dog so I can get out of the car. He took her inside, and they walked past this closed door to like a bathroom, and he's like, oh, Angie must be taking a bath. While we're waiting for her, like, I'll just show you the house. Like, do you want to see the house? Like, I'll show you around. So they went upstairs, and they passed a door with like it's like a locked door, and he's like, oh, that's my roommate is in there.
Oh,
which
God.
Now we know was Michelle.
And it was a locked door, but she was still able to see within, like,
because he took the doorknobs off,
right,
so she could look through the hole, and he tells her to look at her,
right, which I'm like, that's so creepy.
Yeah, and she was just like, it felt wrong, like just staring at someone sleeping in their room, like that's not okay. And by the time she realized that this was like a bad situation, he had already trapped her in a room. She like tried to run away, and he cornered her, and then he assaults her. I'm not going to go into specifics with it, but then he points out to her, this is like so insidious. He points out to her through a window that there's a cop car sitting across the street, and he's like, if you make a sound at all, I'm gonna hurt you. And he's like, I'm gonna do this, and then I'll take you home.
Right. He does that to Michelle as well. Like, he tells her, like, I'm only gonna keep you for a little while, till like Christmas.
Right.
And then a whole year passes, and even like, it's insidious because he keeps telling her, like, nobody's looking for you, and that truly is like true. Her family's not really searching, and she's an adult, so the police like weren't looking for her, and they weren't looking hard. They're like, she's an adult, she has a runaway past, like where she ran away from home for like a significant amount of time, like she didn't come back for her kid, like pretty much like lost cause. Like they literally removed her from the National Crime Information Database after 15 months. So shortly after Amanda was like kidnapped.
This makes me so angry.
Like, so angry. So, like, at no point does anybody like put 2 and 2 together that, like, someone of a similar profile was kidnapped a year later.
Right. So similar to when he first brought Michelle to his home. And I'm also going to add like a little note here that we keep referring to Michelle as Michelle. Michelle has changed her name since then. She now goes by a different name. She goes by Lily Rose Lee. Right. So we are aware of that, but for the sake of this story, we will just refer to her as Michelle until the end, when we give like an update on where they are now, if we can. So just in case anyone is like worried, like we are aware of that, and we want to respect that. So I'm just noting it now. But similar to when he brought Michelle home, he sort of like bound and gagged her and put her in the basement. And Amanda actually tried to free herself. She got like the duct tape off, but she like ripped her nails off. So it's like her fingers are bleeding now, and she can't get out of the chains. And then just super gross, like the next morning he acts like nothing's wrong and is like, oh no, like your fingers, let me get Band-Aids on those for you. And like, here, I got you breakfast. And the fact that that's her birthday as well just makes me so sad. Eventually he did move her upstairs to a bedroom as well. And she notes in her memoir about how like most of the day she would just have to sit in the dark because he like covered up the window in there. And then he kept the light chain too short so that she couldn't flash it to signal for help. And, like, she would just have to sit there and, like, watch the TV and watch her mom and sister on the news. And he would say, like, the stupidest shit, like, oh, your mom looks really upset. Yeah, fucker, because you kidnapped her kid. I just also, like, Luana, Amanda's mom, man, what a woman. Because she, from the jump, was like, fuck all y'all, you're not listening to me. Something is wrong. Right. Because she and Beth got home, and Amanda was not there. Right. And she was not answering her phone, which is, like, that's already 2 strikes against. Like, this is not normal for her. This is not how my Mandy operates. Like, something is wrong. They checked the shower. It was dry. They're like, now I know for sure she did not come home from work. Right. Like, without fail, that was her go-to. And Amanda is, like, very like organized and meticulous. Like, she would talk about how she organized all her clothes by like, and her shoes were like by height and color, and like everything was neat and tidy. So it's like, for her to stray from her norm, very strange. So she called the police, and they were basically like, oh, like, she hasn't even been missing a day yet. Right. She's like a teenage girl. Like, she's probably just off with her boyfriend. Like, she'll come home, calm down. And, you know, obviously they were not. They're like, absolutely not. Like, we know her. This is not normal. Something is very wrong. So they started calling her friends. They started, they got someone to like drive them around the neighborhood to look for her. They made like handwritten missing posters. And she was like, I'm going to put.
Sad because like they're all in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I guarantee you they passed his house.
Oh, absolutely.
And like,
I mean,
they were so close yet so far.
Yeah. So from her neighborhood and from where she was abducted to Seymour Ave, it's about a 10-minute drive. You do have to jump on a major highway. So walkable wise, not quite the same, but still doable. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so they put up these handwritten missing posters with a picture of her with Luana's phone number on it, because she's like, the cops ain't shit. They're not going to help me. I'd rather have this so I get every tip I can follow up on, because they're just going to write it off.
Right.
At a point semi soon after this, a man tipped off police that he'd seen Amanda get in a white car the night she was abducted. He was known to the cops. He did have some substance abuse issues. So they're like, well, I don't know if we can totally believe this guy, but DJ, her boyfriend, had a white car. So they're like, got it. Figured it out. Right. It's the boyfriend.
Right. I mean, to be fair, 9 times out of 10.
Right.
It is the boyfriend.
Right. So, and DJ's story was inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
At first, when they questioned him, when Amanda still hadn't come home, they went to his house and he wouldn't open the door for them, and was like really belligerent with the cops. And then he was like, well, my phone's dead and that's why I missed her calling me. And then he was like, I was fixing motorcycles and she called me at like 11 o'clock. And then later when they were able to like access her phone records, like, it was like before 8 o'clock, you piece of shit. Why are you lying?
Right. That's frustrating to me, because I'm just like, why? Your girlfriend, granted, you guys have not been dating that, but she's missing.
Yeah.
And you are number one suspect right now, buddy. Why are you not being helpful?
Later, when like an investigation really gets underway here, they even had like a friend of his wear a wire and was like, hey, like, aren't you sad that your girlfriend's missing? He's like, I don't give a shit.
Wow.
Like, no, I don't fucking care. I don't want to talk about her. And so I'm like, I don't know. Like, maybe that response was like, oh, she fucking ran away and dipped out on me and didn't say goodbye. Like, I don't know. I don't know what his mentality was. I don't know where he was that night. I don't know why he didn't answer the phone when she called him. I'm just saying the way he behaved was not doing him any favors.
No.
They also eventually like got a warrant for his car because he was driving without a license. And so they like took his car and then they were searching it and they found blood in the trunk.
Yes.
But it was chicken blood that probably leaked out of like grocery bags. So nothing really came of that. They also found a car wash receipt for the day after she went missing. So like on her birthday, and the car wash had like a woody area around it. So they searched it with dogs. Mm-hmm. Again, obviously she is alive, so they didn't find anything. But just like the fact that they're going so hard on like the wrong dude, and like they didn't even listen to Luana from the beginning, who was like, yeah, shit is wrong, like this is bad. Mm-hmm. And then finally there were like 2 detectives who were like, all right, like I'm looking at her file and she has never run away before.
Right.
Like everything about what they're telling me, like he went to her house and he like went in her room and looked at like how neat and tidy it was.
Right.
And her mom was like, look, like she has $100 here. Like kids don't fucking run away from home in their Burger King uniform without the $100 cash they have.
Right.
And he's like, you are absolutely right. Like this is like something serious, and we have wasted so much time, and statistically the longer she is gone, the worse this is going to be. So like kudos to that detective for actually doing your fucking job and like recognizing this shit. I'm just saying.
I know. It's just the lightest of kudos is from me, because I'm just like, you guys are supposed to do your job.
But they were trying and nobody else was doing that shit.
No.
So I'm giving credit where credit is due. And so, and there were two detectives who were involved in this, mm-hmm. and who were like actually taking shit seriously and following up on tips. So like, bless y'all. So
Amanda and Michelle are very much still being like every day they are being assaulted and multiple times a day. Now I'm going from Michelle's book because I read it fully. I haven't read the full interaction of Amanda with, but Michelle said like they spoke very few words to one another, and like when Amanda first met Michelle, she was naked, like she had no clothes on.
Yeah, so
and she was kept that way for like a while, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying any of them were treated like great, but I think Michelle was treated the worst because, and this is just me and because I think she was older than them.
Yes.
And I think he knew that she didn't have any family looking for them, and she was just kind of happenstance, like a good first victim for him and his warped mind. So
having read her memoir and then having read the co-memoir that Gina and Amanda wrote, and maybe they just chose not to share these details. Again, I don't know, and it's also not my business, but Michelle is certainly more forthcoming with like the physical abuse and like, I mean, like the head trauma that he caused to her, and like, you know, like it was awful. And Amanda and Gina both have mentioned that sometimes he would hit them, but they did not mention to the extent that Michelle describes. So I am inclined to agree with you, but also he had a habit of playing them all against each other too, and telling them like, oh well, she thinks you're stuck up, and like, oh well, they don't like you, and so it, again, like, who knows, because I mean, none
of them had anything bad to say about the other in their memoirs. I haven't gotten
they realized that it was like him manipulating them, so,
and they all realized too that like we were not given a chance to actually be together, because if we did, we would have tried to outsmart him. But it's just like, God, you're like, how bad can this? And then it's just like once more people are added, it almost gets worse, because it's just like now these atrocities are happening, and from like Michelle's perspective, she's like, oh God, he got another one, and like I can't even tell her, like, like I can say it's gonna be okay, but it's not okay, and like, and at first as well, Amanda was like, why is his roommate like letting him do this shit? Like, what kind of a person is she? And then it was like, you know, May, so from like April 21st to like May 1st-ish, like a couple weeks, they did not meet. And then he said, I need you to come help me clean up in there, and like made her take a garbage bag and like pick up trash from Michelle's room, and they were like really only allowed to like say hi to each other, and that was like it. So at that point, Amanda's like, I see, we are in a similar situation. That is not actually his roommate. That, like I said, that was May. But between April and May, during this investigation for Amanda's disappearance, they started looking into like tracing her cell phone, which is still like relatively new technology in 2003. Which is wild to think about now, but I'm like, oh my God, it was like brand new technology.
Yeah, I always think of that the Adnan Syed case where they were like pinging his cell phone between like towers, because I think that happened roughly around the same time. It was also like still kind of early in like using that technology to be like, well, we can tell that you were there because your cell phone was near it. So it was like pretty much brand new technology from the FBI. And they brought in a guy to Cleveland. They saw that someone was checking her messages regularly because Castro would like play her voicemails and let her listen to them.
Mockingly play her voicemails and let her listen to her family essentially plead with her to come home.
And it pinged 2 towers on like Cleveland's west side. So the problem with this though is that it was moving between the 2 towers. That covers like 40 blocks. And also it doesn't mean that it was just like in a stationary place there. Like they could have been in a car while he was like driving out of state. So they weren't 100% sure. So they ended up parking at the Family Dollar on Clark Avenue
Makes me so crazy.
with no idea that this is where he took Michelle. And so they're sitting in the parking lot there. That's literally 1,000 feet away from where both of them are being held. They could have walked there. And they staked out for 8 days, and the phone was never turned on. And so they knew she had left her phone charger at home. So like her battery's probably dead at this point. Like we're not going to get any more leads from this. And they sent the expert back to Quantico. Also, at that time, there was a girl that looked almost exactly like Amanda.
I'm not laughing at this. It's like fun. It's funny, but it's not funny.
It's just like infuriatingly funny because I'm like, you're wasting so much fucking time on bullshit because you're cops. So there's this girl that looks a lot like Amanda. And hold on, I have her name written down. Samantha Farnsley. And so, I mean, like blonde hair, same build. She's short. She's the same age. She has like
similar facial
she has like
features.
big boobs. She has like the same facial features. She even has the same eyebrow piercing on the same eye. So like she looks a lot like her, and they keep seeing her, and the police keep hassling her, and they're like, "Let me see your ID. Are you Amanda?" And she's like, "No, I'm not Amanda." And she like gives them her ID.
She's also
and they don't believe her.
She's
a sex worker.
Yeah, she's a sex worker, which is even fun, like because that's how they like get wind of her. Is people are like, "I've seen her like hustling down the street," and then they're like bothering this poor woman.
Right. They're wasting all this time hemming up this woman who has like done everything you asked and shown you her ID and was like, "No, that's not me. Like, you got the wrong person." And then they still force her to come in and meet Amanda's mom, who sees her from behind at first and gets her hopes up and then immediately has them crushed and is like, "That's not my daughter."
And she literally had to get a identity verification like page from the FBI, which is like this is so dumb.
Yeah.
Because the police otherwise kept stopping her. And I'm just like, you guys, like, come on.
So stupid. So a few days after she first met Michelle, Amanda remembers that he came in somewhat panicked and was like, "My daughter has to go into the hospital. I have to watch my grandkid and you have to help me." Mm-hmm. So again, so manipulative and sneaky and smart about doing this bullshit. He like gets his grandson but doesn't let people come in the house. Mm-hmm. And then like his grandson's very young, so he doesn't have to worry about him being like, "Oh, he's got a woman in his house."
Right. And it's so sad too because like when like Michelle talks about seeing him and she like they try to cover up their chains. Yeah. And I'm just like, I get because like he's so little that he's not gonna like understand. But I think they felt bad, like ashamed, and I'm just like, oh god, this is just so terrible all around. And like he deals with that and he still gets by with it. Nobody thought that was weird that like they couldn't go into the house.
Right.
It's like, what the fuck?
Right. He also had a girlfriend at the time and would make like excuses. This was prior to abducting Amanda. He would make excuses to not have her over because he had Michelle at the house. Right. And he would just go to her house all the time. Or like when she came over and was like, "Why is there a TV on upstairs?" He would just give her some like bullshit excuse to get out of it.
And he said afterwards in his like confession, like, "That was a close one. I had to break up with her after that."
God, what a piece of shit. And he was like, "I couldn't juggle both of them." Like, go fuck yourself. God. Amanda also started keeping a diary during this time. So she had an actual like dollar store type children's diary that she would write in, but she also would save like napkins. And if he brought her, you know, like Wendy's or McDonald's bags, like she would rip it open and write on the inside of it.
Often that was how he fed them, like at the beginning, is he would just pick. And when we say McDonald's, it's not fresh McDonald's or Wendy's.
He'd pick it up hours earlier and then bring it home.
Hours, like it's cold, it's greasy, it's probably kind of moldy or like just not fresh. But they were like, it's better than nothing. So, because they were only getting fed like once a day. And both Amanda and Michelle, and I believe Gina, when we get to her, all of them keep diaries and whatnot of some sort. But it was a privilege to have those things. it was like a privilege to have it was a privilege to essentially have anything.
Yeah, he basically was like, I gave you a coloring book, so you fucking owe me. Like, I get to do whatever I want.
And anytime he'd give them a radio or TV or a coloring book, he expected in return to do, like,
gross
sexual assault to them.
Gross.
Extremely disgusting.
The one entry that, like, I mean, a lot of them are really horrible, but there's one of the entries from Amanda's sort of like makeshift diary was from June 23rd. And she wrote, I hope when I get out of here that I'm not scared of every man for the rest of my life, but I'm afraid I will be. And I don't want to be paranoid. I just want my life back the way it was. Like, girl, if you wanted to murder every man you saw for the rest of your life, I would not fault you.
I mean, yeah, Michelle's entries were often about a lot with faith and a lot with dealing with God, but a lot of it was like Joey and thinking about seeing her son. Like, her son was the reason she kept on living.
Yeah.
So much so that she did not think about, like, what would happen after she got out. And, you know, and her way of processing stuff, like, when they first got out, like, I think they did all have kind of issues with male hospital workers. Which
I don't blame them at all.
I'm like,
not at all.
And, you know, and just the trauma of just repeatedly being touched without your consent and beaten and whatnot. It's unfathomable. And in a way, if you do read these memoirs, which I would recommend you reading them, like, in a way, you're not callous to it at the end, but it's just like, it's almost like the Hope memoir is written a little bit differently, but like Michelle's pretty like open about it. It's not that you're like callous towards it, it's just it's happening so often that you don't skim over it, but you're just like, at that point you're like, oh my god, like, this is just happening every day.
Yeah,
this is just routine.
And Amanda said that she at first was like, I'm gonna keep a log in this diary because when I get out I want him to be punished and I need to keep a record of it. So I'm gonna note like how many times he assaults me every day, and I have a little code, and I'm not gonna write the word rape because if he finds it, I know that he'll take it away from me, so I'm gonna like write this. And so she would be like keeping track, and then she got to a point, she's like, there's like, I can't, it's just depressing at this point, like the numbers are just always there, and like I'm just not gonna do it anymore. And I'm just like, Jesus fucking Christ. It's awful. The day after that diary entry that I just read, he actually picked up a 14-year-old girl from a local pool.
Oh, yes.
And brought her to the house. And he was like, hey, do you want to come smoke weed with me? And so he brought her to the house, but people saw them. So he's like, okay, I can't keep her. So, and he told Amanda, and like, she's like, I don't know how much of this is true. Like, I can't trust like anything he says. But he told her, like, oh, well, she was into having sex with me, so we just had sex on a blanket on the floor.
Consensual. I was like, first of all, your house is trash. Who's going to be like, yeah, I'm down for that?
And then he said he drove her back, but then he was pissed because she stole his weed. And
you
Amanda
guys can't
was
see
like,
that, but I rolled really hard.
And Amanda, because of what he said, was just like, I can't imagine that anyone would like willingly want to do that with you, let alone like a 14-year-old girl. But also, like, girl, you got so fucking lucky. Like, you don't know how close you were to being chained to a wall.
Yeah.
Which is also like a testament to like why we need to look out for these kids who are high risk because of shit like this.
Yes.
So that, I mean, there could have been another person in this story, and thank God that, like, you know, there aren't more names on this list. I mean, we have yet to bring Gina into this. We will get to her in a moment, but there are also times when, like, you know, obviously you're going to lose hope in this situation, and like, you're going to want that release. So you're like, I just wish I was fucking dead. Like, just kill me. I wish you would
Michelle
kill me instead
and Amanda
of this.
Throughout, from what I've read, have wished for death.
Yeah.
Like, multiple times, and thought, this is it, this is the end, I'm going to end up dying. Michelle was struck in the head so many times. I was like, I don't, I, don't, I don't know how she lived through all of that.
I don't either.
she, you know, she thought this was going to be the end. Like, she just, like, that's how I'm going to get killed, is just, like, by getting hit in the head a bunch of times.
And we also know now with other contexts that this is also, like, not the first time he's done this.
No.
His ex, who's the mother of at least one of his children,
I think two of his
Grinelda,
kids. Yeah.
two of his daughters.
Mm-hmm.
He abused her. I mean, physically and verbally and emotionally, but he caused her like serious head trauma.
Right,
and then
to
later,
the point where like it caused complications in her health afterwards.
Yes, she ended up developing like a brain tumor and ultimately died because of complications with it. So, I mean, this is a pattern of behavior.
Yes.
This is physical violence in this way. Amanda like talks about how she was just like, I would rather you just kill me instead of doing this anymore. So he went and got a vacuum cleaner and started to strangle her with the cord from it.
Yes.
And then flipped out and was like, I don't want to kill you. That's not what you're here for. You're just here for my problem.
We didn't mention either, but like I think it was like a couple weeks after she was abducted, he calls her mother.
Yeah, I was going to come back to that.
With her own cell phone and tells her mother, like, we're married now.
And he comes up and tells Amanda this too. And he's like, well, I called your mom. It's fine. I called your mom and said that you want to be here and you love me and we're married. But then...
Thank God her mom, though, was like, no, absolutely not. And Michelle also talked about that, too. It was shortly after that because he is raping these women every day. You, dear listeners, might be like, how did they not get pregnant? Because statistically, like, they did. Michelle was impregnated by him multiple times, and he abused her to the point where the baby was lost.
Yeah.
She miscarried, I think at least 5 times. But that was one of the, right after Amanda was kidnapped and captured, she was pregnant, and he basically said, like, you can't have this baby because Amanda's my wife. And like,
so disgusting.
Like in his mind, like, Michelle wasn't allowed. I'm just like, I know from reading statistically that people like this have very low IQs, and I'm not trying to, but I'm like, buddy, you are not using protection. How do you think these women are not going to get pregnant? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? I mean, obviously lots is wrong with you, but like, come on. You know, I'm not trying to say I'm trying to understand the psychology or like the logic, because there's no logic. It's evil and it's terrible all the way through. And it's just one more like incident of just being an absolute like monster.
Yep.
But it just like, you can't have this, so I'm going to punish you for this. And now I'm going to punish, like, you're in physical pain. I'm going to punish you again because now you have miscarried my child, even though I beat the shit out of you for it. I just
also, like, there's no, it's not even like a, well, thank God situation, because she still had to endure, like, horrific fucking things. But I'm like, part of me is surprised that he did not kill Michelle once he abducted Amanda, because he had clearly like written her off at that point in terms of like, originally, like, I abducted you because I thought you were this child and like I was acting out these sexual fantasies on you, but you're not even what I wanted, like, you ruined it. But he also knows that he can't just let her go, and normally in that situation, unfortunately, there's a murder that happens. And so I'm like, part of me is like, well, I'm glad that she is still alive and seems to be doing well.
Right.
As well as you can be in this situation.
Right.
But also, I'm like, I don't even want to say that, because how much more shit she had to live through because of that.
Right. Right. Like, we're in this timeline, we're at
like January of 2006.
Yes.
This is like not even a year since Amanda has been there. Michelle's been there for like 2 years and some change at this point.
Right. And And we haven't even gotten to Gina yet. We'll backtrack to her.
Yeah. So the reason I bring up January 26, 2004 is because at 10 p.m., 2 Cleveland police officers come to the door. And this is because a mother filed a complaint about how he had treated her 4-year-old son on the school bus earlier that day. So he started his day at like 6:40 in the morning driving the school bus. Because, you know, most schools, like, they start at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe 9, 10 if it's a later, like, elementary school. But a lot of, like, Cleveland Municipal School District starts at like 7:30 in the morning.
It's early.
So you gotta go pick up these kids. It's gonna take like an hour to pick up your route. So he drove his normal route. He picked up 60 kids and dropped them off at 2 elementary schools. And when he was done, he picked up an extra midday shift and was assigned to pick up 2 kids and take them to a 2-hour program for children with ADHD at Wade Park Elementary School. So he swapped to the smaller bus,
right?
Drove to Wade, and only one of them got off. The second was a 4-year-old boy, and he was still on the bus, and Castro drove away and went to Wendy's for lunch.
Right.
And he realized that this child is still on the bus. And the little boy later told the police that when he realized he was on the bus, he told him, "Lay down, bitch."
Right. He was being awful.
What the fuck? And it was like cold and there was freezing rain. So like he can't, like, this little boy's 4. He's not going to get off the bus and like go walk anywhere. So he just had to stay in the bus while this man goes inside and like eats at Wendy's. And then he drove to a parking lot, read the newspaper, went to a school building. And then after 2 hours, he took him back to the elementary school where the teacher there was just like, you should just take him home at this point. School's over.
I just don't understand, like, if once you're at Wendy's and the kid's on, why not take him back? Why not take him back? That would be
he's a selfish piece of shit.
Right. But I'm just like, if you're trying to keep your cover, why
to him these are like 2 unrelated things though.
I guess
you know what I mean?
I guess. I know. I try to logic.
I know. You can't logic the situation.
I try to logic these monsters that we read about and like figure out like what is making their brain tick, because that's not how my brain works, obviously. And then it hurts my brain because I can't figure it out. I'm just like, how fucking awful do you have to be that you're going to treat a kid like this who is 4?
Yeah.
And then for the police to not even fully follow up on that, like, it's clearly like, you had a job, you didn't follow up on your job, you technically low-key kidnapped this kid, like, they did not go where they needed to go. You treated this kid like shit, and the cops are not like, red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag.
Well, because a month later when they finally interviewed him about it at the police station, he like didn't deny it. He's like, yep, it happened. It was an accident. Like, I just didn't notice that he was there. I only realized he was on there when like I took the bus back to the headquarters.
So he lied.
And was like, I never said that to him. And he was like, I don't really know why I didn't follow standard protocol and check my bus. I was like mourning my father's death, so I wasn't quite right at that time, and I'm just really sorry that this happened. And so they like, the police referred the case to prosecutors, and they were like, I'm not going to seek criminal charges, and he just got suspended by the school system for 60 days without pay.
So we believe this grown man over a kid.
Fucked, right?
Yeah, super fucked.
Yep. So that was January. Come April, Gina DeJesus is walking home from school with her friend. And she's basically like, we should go like ice skating. Like, I really like going ice skating. She's walking home with her friend Arlene. Right. And she was walking home because she was extra hungry that day. Like, she was running late that morning when she was leaving, so she didn't really eat breakfast. Right. She bought an extra bag of like chips at lunch. Right. So she had bus money, but she spent it on food. And she's like, okay, whatever, it's fine. So they're walking home and she's like, oh, like, we should go ice skating. Wait, no, I'm grounded because I got caught smoking cigarettes. I think I can still have people over. Can you come over? Right. So she gives Arlene some more of her bus money to call home at a payphone. Right. Arlene, we should mention, is... I'm burying the lead, Beth. I'm sorry. I'm burying the lead.
thought we were getting to there. Okay,
no.
Go on.
So Arlene calls her mom, and her mom's like, no, you need to come home. So Gina's like, okay, like, bummer, this sucks, but like, all right, I'm just gonna go home then. Like, I'll see you. It's Friday, but I'll see you on like Monday morning. And so she walks a little further down the road, and she sees in a car Arlene's dad, Ariel Castro. And he says, hey, have you seen Arlene? I'm looking for her. And she's like, oh, I just left her.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, can you come help me find her? And she's like, well, she's like, I just left her. Like, she's right around the corner. You can go drive and find her right now. And he's like, no, can you help me find her? Like, get in the car. So she does.
Because she, again, is good friends with Arlene and knows that that's her dad.
Yes.
And trusts that her dad is just looking for Arlene.
Yes. And, like, once they have discovered that Gina is missing, they start looking into this, and they realize that he had already essentially covered his tracks because he went to the school asking for Arlene, like he was looking for her. So this like covered his story and explained why he was in the area. So when they were like, oh, well, we saw like a car that was there, you know, like, let's look, we're going to put out an alert for the vehicle. Because they said a bunch of kids at the school were like, there was a white two-door car. This like Hispanic guy was driving it. It had like a sticker on the back window. It was a rainbow with a wolf. And so they put out an alert for it, and they started searching, trying to figure out who it was. And they questioned everybody who was on the school's like front door camera.
Mm-hmm.
But it had been out of order that day.
Oh,
so
no.
It would have shown him coming in, but like as school was letting out, he walked in the front door looking for Arlene, asked a security guard, who's someone he grew up with, like it's someone he had known his whole life, if the security guard had seen Arlene. And he's just like, this is totally normal. Like, that's my guy. I know him. He's a bus driver. He works for the school system. He's looking for his kid. So he never said anything to the cops. He like already essentially just like covered his own tracks with this shit. And then he brought her to his house. It's a similar story.
He dragged her to the basement.
Yes.
He turned on the music so no one could hear her being assaulted and tortured. And eventually, so from Michelle's account, Amanda stayed in her own room,
mm-hmm.
and then Gina was chained to with Michelle.
Yes.
And at first, Michelle has been starved at this point so much that he chained her around her neck and then to Gina's ankle.
Yeah.
And Gina is the one. Michelle probably wouldn't have been able to say anything to him because he would have like probably beat the shit out of her. Mm-hmm. But like, Gina's like, we can't go to the bathroom in this trash can. No, he does get them like a little toilet, essentially, like a compostable toilet.
Mm-hmm.
And she like says to him, like, we aren't going to be able to go to the bathroom with her chained like this. And he's like, well, she's so tiny. Like, I'm not going to be able to chain her by her ankle as well. Which is fucking awful. Like, Jesus, dude. Like, and, you know, Michelle at this point is just kind of not checked out, but she's just, I don't think she was expecting to have a third person. And she is keeping up on this stuff because she does have a little black and white TV that she's like being allowed to like watch and see what's happening.
Yes. And also, he's a scumbag, so he keeps making them watch the news. Like, he makes Amanda and Gina watch her family, like, pleading for her to be brought home and, like, putting up missing flyers and things like that.
Right, because he gets off on seeing their being upset, their pain.
Yes. Gina, in, you know, like, the early days of her being there, sees a news story about how the police have sort of made this connection of, like, hey, Amanda Berry went missing around here as well. It's weird that this other girl is missing. Like, could they be connected? And so a lot of the news coverage was about both of them. And Gina remembers, like, seeing her parents on there and feeling better that so many people were looking for her. But she was like, well, you know my parents. Like, you knew my mom. I remember being at the Christmas concert, and like you talking to them, like while Arlene and I were like performing with like choir. And she was like, were you following me? And he was like, yeah, I was like following you all the time. You turned me on. I liked when you wore a black V-neck shirt and a jean skirt. That was my favorite. And I'm like, that's so disgusting.
That of all the things you just told me, that I mean, all these are awful, but that just made my tummy go bloop.
Yes. And so she like asked if she could write her parents a letter. She's like, I just want to let them know I'm okay. Like, can I write it and you send it to them? And she's like, I don't think he ever sent it. Of course he didn't send it.
No,
but
and he told like Amanda, I'll let you talk on the phone if you tell your mom that like you want nothing to do with her and you're happily married to me.
You can't say that we were being held hostage.
And she's like, no, I'm not gonna tell my family like I just left them. Like that would crush her. Like absolutely not.
Yeah, once he took Gina from the basement upstairs, he did the same thing where he would see Amanda on the TV on the news and be like, oh, well, that's my ex-girlfriend. That's why I have that picture of her in here. And she's like, fucking kidding me? Like, you took her, didn't you? And he would lie about it. And then he was like, well, like, I'll show you that, like, you can stick your head in there and look in this room, but, like, you can't let her see you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, she saw Amanda watching the TV in there, and she's like, holy shit, like, there's 2 other girls here in these other rooms.
Right.
And so Gina's just like, well, like, what's her name? And he's like, well, that's Michelle. And
we don't care about her. Jesus.
So fucking rude. And so that is why, like, eventually she was like, well, like, I mean, like, this room is, like, kind of bigger. He's like, well, you do have, like, a big mattress, so, like, the 2 of you can stay in this room together. And that's when he moves Michelle in. But then, like, they did kind of have this solace in each other, at least. They, and they would, like, decorate the room a little bit and things like that.
Yeah, they would hang up when they were allowed to have notebooks, Michelle would draw. So Michelle likes to do art. And she would, like, color and draw and hang up pictures. And so would Gina. And then they would all, like, write down their thoughts and stuff and kind of keep diaries. And because they were allowed to have TVs, they were allowed to watch, like, TV all the time. So it wasn't completely, like, they watched Vampire Diaries together. And they watched, like, Everybody Loves Raymond.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, Michelle really liked Everybody Loves Raymond because she never had a family life like that, and so it was just something that like was kind of aspiring to, because they didn't like hit or fight or like, you know, it was like very, and they all loved each other, and they would like watch that, or they would play, like her and Gina especially would play like the radio together and listen to music, but all of that could change so quickly. Like if Ariel wanted to, he would like rip like their pictures and stuff down, or, you know, it got to a point where when Gina was first brought up there, he would take Michelle outside to the back. This was wild to me. He would take Michelle outside and then assault her outside in broad daylight, and I was like, how did nobody see this? This went on. It's not like it just went on like one day. Every day. I'm like, nobody fucking looked and said, that's weird. Or even if she's not making a sound, nobody was like, they keep having sex in the backyard. That's I don't like that.
Right. Or why would you not at least like mention to your friend, like, man, my neighbor is a fucking weirdo and they be fucking out in the backyard all the time. Like, that shit's weird.
Right. Nothing is said. So, you know, Michelle thinks that because Gina was there, he was like ashamed at first of like assaulting her in the bedroom, but he eventually got to the point where they were chained together, so he assaulted both of them, which is fucking terrible. And she said there's a different amount of shame, and like it's a different experience when you have somebody, like, you cannot help this other person that is physically being hurt.
Yeah. And that's, Amanda has mentioned, like, a few times, too, when they were, like, they were all kept in the basement at a point because of, like, other circumstances. And and like he came down to like assault her, and she was like, they're right there. And so he took her upstairs and then brought her back downstairs again. And I'm like, this whole situation is just so fucked. While all of this is happening with them there, like the investigation is still continuing, and now there's this new investigation searching for Gina. And while this is happening, like Amanda's mom is obviously like, who would be like coping well with this? She's not coping well with this. She had lost like 30 pounds in the last year. Beth remembers, not our Beth, but Beth, Amanda's sister, remembers that like she was drinking really heavily, like she was self-medicating, and she was like, I could just like feel her like slipping away. She like hadn't been able to go back to work, so she was like getting by on like government assistance, and like was really just like, this was not a life. Like she was not living a life. This really just sort of destroyed her. They would call like news stations, like begging them to like run like Amanda's story on like holidays when people might be watching more and might be more inclined to like on Mother's Day or like Christmas, just like any kind of like hook that would maybe someone knows something and will finally like they'll get eyes on this. Then normally when like reporters would come to interview them, like Luana would like yell at them if they were ignoring her, but then like she's like, at least like some coverage is better than none, so like let's not drive them off, Mom. But they got a call from America's Most Wanted, and they wanted to come to Cleveland, and they filmed an America's Most Wanted interview, an episode about Amanda, and Gina's family was also featured in this episode. When they finished filming this, Beth remembers that like at this point she had just kind of accepted like that the odds were not good that Amanda was still alive.
Right.
And she remembers her mom saying, my heart doesn't feel empty like it would if she was gone. I feel like she's close. So like her mom, while devastated, was still like holding out hope.
Right.
And the girls also wrote about how like he made them watch the America's Most Wanted episode together.
Manipulative.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Around this same time, like this was like April of 2004, his daughter Angie and her husband Sam got a message on their voicemail at home, like on their answering machine. And so like they just moved, they had a new landline number, and they just assumed like this is either from like one of her parents, or like that's like really the only people who have this new number.
Right.
And they listened to the message, and at first it just sounded like a pocket dial, like when you just hear the muffled sound of being in somebody's like pocket or something. And then they heard a voice of a young woman who sounded terrified and was screaming, "Get away from me." And so they were like, what the fuck? So they called the cops. And then when the police came to the house and listened to it, they were like, oh, it's probably a prank call. And Angie's like, didn't a girl just go missing around here? Like, this is literally 2 weeks after Gina went missing. And it was like all over the news. And Arlene, Angie's little sister, was the last person to see Gina. They were friends, and she felt incredibly guilty about this. Like, she felt like it was her fault for not walking with her. And so she's like...
It does make you, like, as a small aside, it does make you wonder, like, if his daughter had stayed with Gina...
Right.
Would Gina have been picked up?
Not that day.
Or, you know, if... I guess that's true. Like, was it in...
He like, clearly knew who she was.
Right. Or, and even, like, Amanda. Like, if Amanda hadn't accepted that ride...
Right. Would he have just picked up somebody else? Or would he have come back for her on a different day?
Right.
Or...
Right. If Michelle had just stayed at the Family Dollar and not gotten... and been like, no.
Yeah. I'm good. I'll walk.
Yeah. And just stayed in there. Like,
or if anyone had taken, like, any of them... Like, if anyone had taken Michelle seriously, and if she could have been like, like, that's sketchy that guy hasn't left yet. Like, can you call me a cab or something like that? And they were like, yeah, girl, like, stay in here. Don't go outside by that weird man.
Right. And that's not to say, like, you know, I don't fault anybody in these situations. Like, you're doing the best you can. He obviously preyed on people that he knew did not have agency or power the same way he did as a man. But I think it's also kind of a sign of the times as well. Like, this is the early 2000s. I think we societally have changed a little bit and are more cognizant of like sketchy and weird situations. And I think especially like as women, we do tend to like, I'm always dirty eyeballing people like all the time, like when I'm out, like, and
well, there was recently at our library, there was a woman who was there, and she'd been there for a while, and she was using the restroom, and a guy came in and was like walking around looking, and then came up and was like, was there a girl in here named this? And was like, it's my girlfriend, I was supposed to come pick her up. And so I went, because the way our library is set up, like our bathrooms are kind of secluded, and you have to like talk to us to be able to get into them. So I went the back way and caught her in the hallway and was like, hey, before you go out there, there's a guy here who is looking for someone. Like, he said this name, like, is that you? And are you expecting someone? She was like, oh yes, that's my boyfriend, but good looking out. And I was like, of course. So I'm like, I also am always just like, men, ugh, like,
right.
Are you telling me the truth, or are you trying to snatch someone?
Right, because I mean, how many times as us being like in a kind of customer service role, like, thank you, male coworker. I thank you in person, but
yes.
Thank you. Like,
also
kudos.
formal petition to change male coworker's nickname to Finn the Human. Like, this feels the right time for his valiant deeds in protecting us from creepers, but also that like majestic hair.
Yeah, that I'm okay with that. It's gonna take me a while to remember that, so just keep like
every time you say male coworker, I'll go Finn the Human.
But yeah, like, how many times have like having an interaction with him, and he's just like, I knew it. Yep. I knew that guy was like, leave him to me. Yep. I will take the creep. Yep. And like, that was like my first where, because fairly new to working with us, and because it was the same summer that he had like came spring, same summer when I had that like dirty old man coming in who was like real into me reading erotic stories to him, and I was like, nope. And having male coworker be like, I don't know who you're talking about, I'll help you, what do you need? Like, very dismissive of it, to the point where I was like, thank you. Thank you. Like, that was really kind of the first time working with another man in like, at like where we work, that I had someone like actively like shut it down. Yes. Like, absolutely not. Do not pass go. If you're gonna be a fucking creep, try to be a fucking creep with me. Yes. Oh, you don't want to? Too fucking bad. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Finn the Human, formerly known as male coworker.
Appreciate it.
You passed the vibe check.
Yeah. Sorry.
So there was this weird phone call thing, and they were all just like, I feel like maybe you should be taking this more seriously. And like years later, like Gina's mom and like the husband in this scenario both remembered this, and were like, hey, like, can we look at this? And so they had like traced the call, and it went to like some random dude who had like an alibi. He was like at a party with a bunch of people, and they're like, no, like, he was here during that time. Like, that's not who that was. So they later were like, well, Gina, can you listen to this? And she's like, I mean, like, it's like a really shitty, like, it's a pocket dial. Like, I can't tell whose voice that is. They were like, maybe this was like a mistake in tracing it, and it was actually from Castro's cell phone, because Angie still is just like, I can't. I was so haunted by this, and it did not sound like someone just like fucking around. Like, it sounded like someone in danger pleading for help. She's like, I just can't dismiss that could have been my dad accidentally calling us. Like, he was one of two people who had this phone number, right? Like, while he was doing something awful to these girls. So there's no proof that it was. Like, there's, you know, according to the FBI, it was not his phone, but it is just too strange of a coincidence at that time.
Yeah. And I mean, too, when we think of like,
and also, again, tracing phone calls super early in that technology at that point.
And when we think of like this stuff, it's just so many things in this investigation that are so frustrating because like at some point, like I think I told you about this when we were at work, like they had like a psychic working at it at the time, which, you know, we talk about forensic science not being really exact and like how sometimes they can manipulate this stuff to kind of get the answers they want, right? Like we know that. No woo-woo witch in the woods for us. And having like psychics and stuff like kind of be like, you know, we were in this area, we felt like this, and just being dismissed, like at what point, especially when a year goes by, 2 years go by, at what point are you just like, let's take paws to the wall, try new things, see what sticks, see if we can find a break in this?
Yeah,
because it just far too long. And like that's something that Michelle talks about with like the beginning of her book. Like, I'm writing this because I want you, the reader, to be aware. I want you to be more aware. I want you to go out in the world, and if you see something that's wrong, I want you to say something so that you can potentially save people, because that didn't happen for us, and I want to give back and push for more like there's so many people that are still missing, which we can talk more about like on the other half of this.
Yeah. Before we wrap up this one, though, I do want to continue with some of the initial investigations into Gina going missing. So they very early, the FBI focused on Fernando Colon, who was Arlene's stepdad. So
who's also like not a bad dude.
Right. Arlene, after
it's actually even more infuriating that they focused on him.
I know. So that was like kind of their first, just like how they went after DJ at first when Amanda went missing. And then there was a guy that kept coming to Burger King a lot that like thought she was cute, that they also looked into, but again, like wrote him off, and then he left town. So like again, like you're looking at these random people, like that poor girl who's a sex worker, like you're harassing her, you're like looking at all these wrong leads. When Arlene left Gina that day, she went to West Town Square, like the shopping area over there, which is where her stepdad worked as a security guard. And then he drove her home that day. And they were like, the FBI was like, well, he really would have only needed like 5 minutes to drop Arlene off and then go back and get Gina. So it still kind of works. And he knows Gina, and he carries a gun because he's a security guard. So he has like opportunity. And so 5 days after Gina went missing, the FBI questioned him, and they had recently given him an award for helping them solve a bank robbery there. So they're like, oh, we know this guy.
What the fuck?
Right? What? So like he did this great thing, and then you're like, oh, hey, did you steal a little girl? Like, fuck you.
Also, like, what the like, he clearly does not fit a profile of somebody that would have, other than like, oh, you know who Gina is.
And racial profiling. That's like essentially it. Like, so they questioned him, and while he's being questioned, they searched his car, and they used luminol to look for like blood or anything. They didn't find anything. They're like, hey, will you take a lie detector test? He's like, hell yeah, I'll take a lie detector test. He passes it. And like, he says that he told the agents, like, you're talking to the wrong man. You need to look at Ariel Castro. Like, you need to look at her bio dad, like Arlene's dad. And he's like, not only does Castro know Gina, but he is like violent as shit. Like, he beat my wife. He like, there's a bad guy. You need to look at him. And these like agents are like, he never said that. He never told us to look at him.
I don't believe that.
Right? And then it's even more infuriating when later it was a court case where it's alleged that Ariel Castro convinced 2 of his daughters to accuse their stepdad of sexual molestation. And while their mom was like, absolutely not, like, I will vouch for him. Like, I will tell you that their dad is behind this. He's a piece of shit. He like has abused me and done terrible things to me like the entire time I've known him. He is absolutely behind this. And there was like a whole court case about it.
Right.
So like the fact that then like he would watch this news, and he would know like that they're looking, like, obviously he would know that his daughter's stepdad is being like asked about this.
Right.
So the fact that he would watch it and like relish the fact that like investigators were looking at the wrong person. Absolutely, in my brain, I'm like, oh, so he's like, okay, you already thought it was him. Like, I'll throw him under the fucking bus. Girls say that he touched you so that, like, they'll have more ammo to think that he took her. And that takes the heat off me.
The cops, the cops went to his house because of him being a bus driver and, like, had this accusation.
Mm-hmm.
And never once do they, and, you know, I know that, here's the thing, like, there was a court record. Like, his ex-wife went to court, but she didn't testify against him because she was afraid. Like, he literally threatened her, and she was afraid to testify against him. So they dismissed the court case, and he never went to jail for his domestic abuse. But that's a court fucking record! Like, that's public record! And it's on, like, right? Like, that should be in his record, and then he's getting the cops investigating him for not doing his fucking job.
Yeah.
And never once is that, again, red flag. Yeah. And clearly they have where he lives, and not at one point do they go, there's a connection between this.
Right. So, yeah. So in August of 2005, there was a trial for Fernando. September of 2004, when Castro was holding Amanda, Gina, and Michelle captive, he had taken Emily, who was 16 at the time, and Arlene, who was 13 at the time, to the police station to file a complaint that Cologne had touched them inappropriately while they slept. Fernando was like, abso-fucking-lutely not. This is their dad telling them to do this shit. This is Castro doing this. Like I said, Granilda, who goes by Nilda, was like, no, absolutely not. Like, this is Castro. He, like, made them make these false charges. He, like, bribed them with, like, money or something to get them to do this. And she was like, if anything inappropriate had happened, my daughters would have told me right away. And they've never said shit about this. And she said Arlene told her that she'd had a dream that he had touched her and that dream had become an exaggerated story. 5 days before the trial, she reported to the police that Castro was pressuring Emily, who was then living in Fort Wayne, Indiana, to come back to Cleveland to testify against her stepdad. And he told her mom, I'm going to bring Emily back and beat your ass in front of her. And so she, from that, sought a restraining order to keep him from coming near her or her two children.
Again, never a red flag.
Right.
Never, let's follow this lead of this scumbag guy.
Right. And so she's like, he's threatened to kill me. He's threatened to kill the girls. And he didn't have visitation rights of his kids, but she was like, he frequently abducts them and keeps them from me. Mm-hmm. So you need to help us. So they issued a temporary restraining order that required him to complete batterer counseling, and he wasn't allowed to drink alcohol, use illegal drugs, or possess a deadly weapon. Great fucking load of shit this did, because he did all of those fucking things.
Right.
There was, like, no home visit, so nobody went to his house to, like, check on this shit. The temporary restraining order didn't, like, raise any red flags at the school system, so they didn't fire him. A prosecutor said that there were so many domestic violence cases that it was just, like, impossible to check all of them against school and city employees. Yeah.
Wait.
I know.
Wait.
I know. It's like, there's just so many cases. So it's like, we can't check if everybody who works for the city
or is not
on this list. Like, there's too many people. I'm like, search and find, man. Just run a list. It's not that hard. Yeah.
What?
And so they had a court date scheduled to see, like, whether or not they were going to make that restraining order permanent. And, like, Castro showed up to court with his lawyer, and so did Nilda did not come. Nilda and her lawyer didn't show up because he had a hearing at the same time in juvie. So, like, her lawyer couldn't be there, so she didn't show up. So they're like, well, if her lawyer is not there, I'm not going to go forward with this. So you have, like, 2 weeks to file for a new hearing. And then because she couldn't, the case got dismissed, and he was free of, like, all of those minimal constraints. And she was like, after my lawyer showed up, I lost my nerve to keep, like, pursuing this. Jesus. And so then Fernando's court case happened, And there was like testimony about how violent Castro was. And the defense's central argument was that he was violent, vindictive, and controlling, and was fully capable of using his own daughters as a means to settle a grudge against a man who is now living with his ex-wife. And they're like, well, it's not really like a love triangle. It's a power triangle. It's a control triangle. And he's obsessed with controlling his ex-wife. And then Castro went on the witness stand and he was asked his address and he said 2207 Seymour Ave. And of course, he's got 3 girls staying at that house while he's sitting there in fucking court. They asked, does anyone live there with you? And he said no. And then under questioning, he acknowledged that he'd been violent, but said that it was her fault. Like, she provoked it. And when they asked if it had ever gotten physical, he said, well, there was times she got physical with me. Like, she would hit me. And yeah, one time when we were fighting, she fell and she hit her head on the doorknob or on the door jamb. And so he denied more than 20 times that he ever laid a hand on her. And then when she got on the stand and they asked if he assaulted her and if it happened more than once and if it ever required medical attention and if that happened more than once and if she ever had any cuts or bruises or dislocated limbs from him or any problems with her eyesight or nerves or facial damage because of this or with brain damage, she answered yes to all of the above.
But nothing came of that? Other than I'm hoping they dismiss Cologne's
So Emily and Arlene testified at the start of the trial that he had touched them inappropriately. Right. And she was like, I even took like Arlene to a psychologist because she was so distraught over Gina going missing, and he evaluated her for PTSD. And like, why wouldn't that have come up then? Like, why would she have not said something to a psychologist there? And they were like, well, then why'd you stay with him? And she's like, because I thought he was going to change. Like, he told me he'd stop doing it. Like, I wanted to believe him. So.
Also, she's in a domestic violence situation.
Yes.
Like, what are the chances that she's also being threatened? Like, if you leave me, I will make your life a living hell.
Yes. So again, at the end of this trial, Fernando was convicted of gross sexual imposition, which is a felony, and sentenced to 3 years probation. But he was acquitted of the charges of rape and being a sexually violent predator. And since there was no physical evidence or witnesses, like the only evidence against him was the testimony of the 2 girls. So he was like, the prosecutor basically was like, this is he said, she said. So like, this is the verdict we're coming down with. And in the end, the prosecutor even said like, this is so gross. He said he didn't believe the theory that Castro had orchestrated the entire affair, saying that their testimony was pretty convincing. So, like, even this prosecutor was like, no, I don't buy it. I think they're telling the truth.
Jesus Christ. Ugh.
So.
How do people sleep at night?
I know.
How do people in the court system sleep at night?
Probably in their piles of fucking money.
Probably.
Lawyers.
Jesus.
Gross.
So all this is happening
and at the time when he's like, oh, my kids are coming around, you guys have to get out of their rooms because they want to see their old rooms. So he takes all 3 girls down to the basement.
Right.
And then Emily came from Indiana to stay with him. So he moved them out to the garage and made them stay in his locked van.
That's right. For like a week straight.
Yes.
In the sweltering summer heat.
Yes.
And they were told, because he carried a gun with him like at all times, that if they were to move, he would shoot them, because they all contemplate like, how do we escape this? And they were just like, there's literally no time.
Yeah.
And the time it would take us to get out of here, we would be dead.
Yes. And they also, he told them like, you are not allowed to talk to each other. Like, I'll know if you talk to each other. Like, you can't say shit, because he didn't want them plotting against him or like finding out, which is what they did, because they did talk to each other, finding out that he'd been playing them against each other and being like, oh, well, like, she doesn't like you and she thinks that you get treated better than the other girls, right. Or like, you know, they don't like you because you're a stuck-up bitch, or like whatever. And so they all talked and were like, all right, like, we have to all agree that we're not going to snitch on each other. And they like were like, oh shit, like, well, you're not stuck up, or like, oh, you're like really nice. I don't know why I thought you were mean. Probably because he keeps telling me this shit about you. And so they did kind of have like these moments of levity and all of this horrific shit where they got to talk about like they talked about like how they liked Will Smith movies, and they're like, oh, but like he doesn't let you watch them, right? Because he's super racist. And they're like, yeah, we can't listen to rap music either.
Right.
So they did kind of have this like these moments of sort of getting to know each other and confide in each other, but like had to go on this like trust that none of them were going to say anything to him about them talking to each other. And while they were in the car, Amanda had this moment of thinking like, I could probably reach the gas pedal and get this car out of here. But like, what if it goes wrong? Like, what if he comes out right now? Like, what if something happens with the car? What if it makes a loud noise and he comes out and he shoots us? What if, like, all these what ifs. Mm-hmm. And she like debated and debated and debated. And just when she was about to just like shoot her shot, he came back out to the car.
And it cannot be emphasized enough that he tested them so much. Absolutely. That like the absolute mind fuckery of it all maybe physical chains aren't present, but like having them in your mind of like, I have been threatened and beaten and like tested to the point of like, I'm afraid, I am so deeply afraid of like dying or something, a fate worse than that, because so many horrific things had happened to them at this point that they stayed submissive essentially because they were afraid of the worst happening. Right.
And he also they have all kind of like realized after this too that like he probably had some way of like listening in on them during all of this anyway, because when they were brought back into the house and in their rooms, like he would tell them things again that like were part of what they had talked about. And so, like, Amanda was like, well, he yelled at me and said that, like, I talked to them about, like, Will Smith movies. And she's like, how would he have known that if they hadn't told him that? So, like, I can't believe that we all agreed we weren't going to talk. And then they, like, snitched on me. Mm-hmm. And then he did the same thing to Gina and Michelle, where he would bring up something. And they'd be like, oh, my God, she ratted us out. Like, she is a stuck-up bitch. And so, like, everything was just so manipulative, and like he just continued like, well, I left them alone too much together, so now I gotta do damage control and make sure they all hate each other and don't trust each other again.
Right.
So gross.
It is so gross.
We will stop at this point. There is much more to this story. We do want to give you the full story of how we got to where we are now, what happened to all of these people involved in this story.
Thank you for listening to us thus far and for the emotional highs and lows that we've gone through in this episode.
Yes.
We started out so lightly.
Yeah.
But we will continue next week with more information about it and also what has happened across the state, like how this has impacted across the state, because it has made changes and whatnot, which is good.
Yes. We want to see more positive change.
Yes. So
and also in the meantime, I mean, we I don't want to say this is entertainment, but we know what this is. We know what true crime podcast episodes are like I indulge in true crime podcasts as well, but it is important to remember that these are real people who suffered horrific things, and that there are so many people out there that are in circumstances like this right now who, similar to Michelle, maybe don't have someone who's looking for them, or maybe, the people who are looking for them are not being taken seriously. So I do urge you to look into the cases of missing and murdered women in the United States, particularly missing and murdered Indigenous women who are so often forgotten and left behind in situations like this. So if you are taking these moments of indulgence in the safety of these podcasts, I urge you to also exert some energy in these scary real world situations that have not been solved yet, and look into that. And if you have means available to donate to someone who is helping women in situations like this, please do.
Yes. Or, look, even locally, there are things that look into that. And if there's means of, even if you don't have monetary means, you probably have social media means.
Yes.
You could probably share and let people know,
Yes.
and share about like places that need fundraising, share about information. It's all important, and it's all good work. Because that's, as I said in the beginning of Michelle's book, that she wrote that book because she wanted people to know her story, so that they'd share her story, so that they are aware and think about it to help other people in this world.
Right.
Because there's too many cases.
Right. And again, if you're a woman and you've got that feeling and you see something and it doesn't sit right, I mean, I'm not asking you to put yourself in danger, but if you see an opportunity to help someone else, the worst that they're going to say is like, no, that's my boyfriend. It's fine, but thank you. You know?
Right. And most women going to recognize, like,
yes.
or not just women, just most female bodied, like,
yeah.
or, you know, female identifying, they're going to recognize that and go, thank you for looking out for me. Because
exactly.
There's no way on this green earth that, unfortunately, there's no way you haven't been exposed to something gross in your life.
Yep. And because it's topical, if you are not a woman, you don't identify as a woman, and you identify as anything but a woman, if you're getting pissy about people picking the bear over men, kindly take several seats. It's shit like this. That's why we answer that way.
Yep. For sure.
So now that I've yelled at you, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have like a great tagline like stay safe and
just
don't kill people.
Just be kind to one another
yeah.
this week. Be kind. Look out for one another. You know, listen to people.
Yeah.
Kindly listen to them. And, you know, thank you again for our spooky sponsor.
Yes, thank you, spooky sponsor.
And yeah, we hope you have a good start of like the warmer months and the warmer seasons. And we hope that, you know, you just stay kind and nice to one another and be gentle during some this crazy world that we're living in right now. This kind of capitalistic hellscape.
We gotta take care of each other.
That's right. So once again, stay spooky, friends.